There are moments when I find myself frozen mid-thought, caught in a sudden, uneasy silence inside my own mind. It's not because anything was said aloud. It's because of what wasn't said, what I didn't voice, but felt deep in my chest. I've noticed it most when I'm scrolling through a feed, barely paying attention, and then my eyes catch a glimpse of someone living a story I thought I was writing too. Someone who seems to be moving faster, achieving more, standing taller in ways that shake something inside me. It's a barely audible whisper, but it stirs up something like a shadow, creeping quietly across my energy, dulling it without me noticing until later. I tried to explain it to a friend once. "I don't even talk about it," I said. "I don't complain or compare out loud. But inside, there's this feeling, like I'm smaller somehow, like I'm losing ground without knowing where or why." The friend shrugged it off, telling me I was being too hard on myself, that comparison was just part of life. But it felt different to me. It wasn't just about envy or frustration. It felt physical, like a tightening in my chest or a slump in my shoulders that no pep talk could fix. I remember another time I was at a gathering, surrounded by men whose confidence seemed effortless, whose presence filled the room like warm sunlight. I stood there, quiet, speaking little, but inside I was spinning a story of inadequacy. Why am I not there yet? I questioned silently. What's wrong with me? The more I told myself I was fine, the more my body seemed to protest in silence. My heart beat unevenly, my breath shortened just a bit, and I caught myself shrinking into the space I occupied, as if to make room for those who appeared to be winning. I was unaware of just how deeply this internal dialogue was reshaping me, shifting my stance and the way I carried my own worth. This is where it gets tricky. The voice of comparison doesn't always declare itself with thunder. Sometimes, it slips in through the smallest cracks in our day-to-day reality. It's the glance at a colleague's email announcing their promotion, the casual mention of a friend's business success, or that fleeting look at a stranger's physique in a crowded subway car. At those micro moments, there's an almost invisible transaction happening between my mind and body, a silent bargaining over status, self-worth, and belonging. And even though I tell myself I'm unaffected, my biology quietly records each loss, each subtle confirmation that I might be falling behind. I've come to realize this is not about weakness or failure on my part. It isn't about me being less or broken. It's about the way my body interprets these signals, how it adjusts to what it perceives as a shift in my position relative to others. Without my awareness, my energy recalibrates, often pulling inward. This adjustment happens below the level of conscious thought, but its effects are profound. An invisible current that shapes my mood, my focus, and even my drive to move forward. What's more, this isn't just an occasional ripple. It's a constant current running beneath the surface. Modern life feeds the stream relentlessly. We are connected, compared, and measured in ways our ancestors never imagined. Every notification, every social post, every glimpse of someone else's highlight reel triggers a cascade of unspoken judgments. Over time, these small moments pile up like invisible weight, tugging on my sense of self, leaving a residue of tension that I carry long after the screen goes dark. And here's the real challenge. The problem isn't just that I compare. It's how I internalize that comparison. The story I tell myself in those quiet moments determines whether I stay stuck in the shadow or begin to reclaim my light. The way my brain reads the scoreboard of life sends messages to my body that shape my entire being. When those messages say, "You're behind" or "You're less," my energy begins to contract, not out of weakness, but because it's adapting. It's a survival mechanism, a shift meant to protect me, but one that quietly chips away at my presence, my initiative, and my ability to show up as the man I want to be. I'm starting to see this pattern with more clarity, and honestly, it's uncomfortable to admit how much it's influenced me without my knowing. But recognizing this silent comparison, this quiet energy shift, feels like the first step out of a dark room I've been living in unknowingly. It's like suddenly noticing the tight bands wrapped around me and beginning to unravel them, thread by thread. In this space of acknowledgement, I realize there's more to this story than just the pain of feeling less. There's a deeper call, A call to understand how this quiet battle has shaped me and how I might begin to shift that experience from inside out. It's not about competing harder or trying to outrun others. It's about stopping the cycle that tells my body to shrink, that tells my spirit to dim. As I sit with these thoughts, I wonder, how often do I let these silent comparisons dictate my day? Where in my life am I most vulnerable to this invisible pressure? And, most importantly, what would it mean to finally reclaim my energy, my posture, not just physically but emotionally and mentally, in a way that feels true to who I am, beyond the shadows cast by others? The journey ahead feels both challenging and necessary. It's a chance to look honestly at how we, as men, respond to the quiet measures of success and failure, and to chart a path toward a deeper sense of presence and power. I don't have all the answers yet, but the willingness to explore this invisible current, that feels like the core of what's needed. I'm ready to take that step. Are you? There was a morning when I found myself standing before the mirror longer than usual. It wasn't vanity pulling me there, but a subtle unrest I couldn't shake. My eyes traced the lines of my face and the set of my shoulders, searching for signs of progress, proof of achievement, or maybe just affirmation that I wasn't slipping backward. Yet what stared back felt unsettled. A quiet tension simmering beneath my skin, almost like a storm gathering with no thunder. In that moment, I realized the unease I felt wasn't about how I looked or what I had accomplished. It was about the way my body held stories I hadn't spoken aloud. A narrative weaving doubt and comparison into every muscle and breath. I recall a conversation with a mentor some time ago, where I confessed feeling drained despite outward appearances of success. He paused and said something that hit me deeply. Your energy isn't just about what you do. It's about where you anchor your value. At first I shrugged, unsure what he meant, but the more I turned it over in my mind, the more I saw that my sense of self was tethered to a scale I couldn't see but constantly measured against others. This invisible tally wasn't just mental. It lodged itself inside my physiology, altering how my body carried intention and readiness. When I felt behind, even subconsciously, my posture shifted, my breathing shortened, and an unspoken signal went out to hold back, like a fortress lowering its gates before the siege even began. One afternoon, I found myself at a local gym, surrounded by men whose dedication was unmistakable. Their movements sure, purposeful, energized. I was there to build strength, but every repetition ended with a shadow settling over my confidence. I caught myself tracking their progress in my head, tallying their abilities against my own, a silent scoreboard locking my attention away from my workout. That lingering assessment drained me more than fatigue ever could. In hindsight, I can see how the mere act of aligning my worth against theirs cooled my internal fire, fragmenting my focus and making every lift heavier. My body wasn't just working against weights. It was wrestling with the burdens of silent judgment and shrinking self-belief. The tricky part is that our body responds to perceived shifts in status with a biochemical dance we rarely notice. Nervous system signals send instructions to conserve, soften, or expand based on subjective readings of where we stand. When we unconsciously interpret ourselves as being in decline or less than, hormonal secretions adjust, cortisol rises, adrenaline flickers briefly then fades, and these fluctuations shape everything from mood to muscle tension. The whole system becomes a feedback loop where the way I hold my body influences how I think, feels, and acts, which then reinforces the initial posture of retreat or diminished energy. It's like a vast, complex clockwork responding instantly to the signals I send, even if I'm not tuned into the mechanics. During a challenging project at work, I remember the sensation vividly. Despite hours of preparation, I was plagued by an undercurrent of anxiety that I couldn't quell. Every update from colleagues sharing their milestones intensified the knot tightening in my chest. I realized that my body wasn't simply mirroring stress. It was compounding it by sinking into patterns rooted in the assumption I was lagging behind. This caused me to pull back from opportunities, second-guess proposals, and even avoid key meetings. What struck me was how deeply this pattern went beyond the rational. I wasn't just worried about falling behind. My entire nervous system was rehearsing withdrawal, anticipating defeat before it had even truly arrived. Taking a walk through the city one evening, the streets thrummed with life, strangers moving with purpose, laughter spilling out from cafes, lights glowing warmly against the dark. Amidst that vibrant energy, I confronted my own pull toward shrinking. It was as if the collective momentum around me was a mirror reflecting my own hesitations. But then an idea rose quietly within me. What if I could untangle my state from these automatic readings? What if I could learn to tune my body differently, hold my energy without it faltering at fleeting cues, and cultivate a resilience rooted not in comparison, but in presence? That afternoon, I began experimenting, adjusting how I stood, how I breathed, practicing a gentle but deliberate expansion of my chest and grounding of my feet. At first, it felt awkward, like trying to wear a suit that hadn't been tailored for me yet. Yet with each small shift, a subtle transformation took place. My heartbeat steadied, and a sense of calm confidence began to replace the usual tightening. It was as if my body welcomed a new language, one where I wasn't responding to imagined hierarchies but creating a space of steady strength within myself. This wasn't about pretending or masking doubts, but about reprogramming a physical response that had quietly eroded my presence. I also started paying attention to the stories my muscles told during moments away from screens or social feedback, how tension settled around my neck after a day of self-imposed comparisons, how my hands sometimes trembled when I faced perceived judgment. Slowly, I learned that these sensations were not foreign enemies but messages signaling where my internal system needed care and attentiveness. By acknowledging them openly, I began to interrupt automatic declines in energy and redirect my focus inward toward repair and reclamation. In one particularly revealing incident, I found myself stuck in the usual loop at a networking event, grappling internally with feelings of inadequacy as others exchanged successes. Instead of retreating, I chose to stay grounded physically, feet firmly on the floor, shoulders broad, breath deep and even. Something shifted. I noticed the subtle but undeniable difference in how people responded to me when I brought an air of calm assurance rather than invisible tension. That evening, I came away with new connections, yes, but more importantly, a fresh awareness that my external environment is only as intimidating as the energy I bring into it. All these moments taught me that recognizing the body's subtle cues is not a weakness. It's a gateway to reclaiming control over how I engage with the world. It challenges me to step beyond unconscious losses of momentum and hold space for an inner confidence that isn't contingent on external validation. Now, consider how this applies when you face those quick flashes of doubt. Can you feel the tightness or restriction before it takes hold? What if, in those seconds, you consciously rewired your response, breathing into a broader posture, refocusing your mind toward your own trajectory rather than a shifting scoreboard? By learning to read and respond differently to these embodied signals, I am beginning to break free from cycles that once carried me downward. It's a subtle war fought beneath awareness, one that rewrites my relationship with energy, power, and presence. This awareness creates a new landscape where resilience grows not from competing with others but from mastering the dialogue within, allowing me to step forward grounded, purposeful, and alive. That day lingers vividly in my mind, wrapped in a quiet tension unlike anything I had felt before. I had accepted an invitation to join a small gathering of men, each successful by conventional standards, leaders in their fields, confident in ways that seemed effortless, their laughter filling the room with assured warmth. As we exchanged stories, something inside me twisted, not from envy but from a sudden recognition of how tightly I had wrapped my self-worth around others' achievements. I struggled silently, lips curled into a polite smile while my heart tightened, as though it were recoiling from an unspoken measure stacked against me. Suddenly, I noticed my hands clenched on the edge of the chair, knuckles whitening. It was as if my body was signaling a struggle beneath my composed exterior. That moment, more than any spoken word, revealed a deeper truth. Comparison seeps into our veins, reshaping our posture in ways our mind won't catch. Yet our body will announce with subtle shifts. Nerves taut like stretched cords, breath shallower than usual, muscles constricted as if bracing for defeat. I recognized that my physical self was responding not just to the environment but to an internal script, one wired from years of silent self-assessments and unvoiced doubts. The weight of those moments settled heavily, reminding me that the unseen battles men wage within often have tangible footprints in the body. Shortly after, I began to experiment with how I allowed myself to sit or stand in moments where comparison awakened. In one particular work meeting, the room pulsed with excitement as colleagues shared new successes. Rather than sinking into my habitual silence, I consciously unfolded my shoulders, allowed my spine to lengthen, and quieted the rush of swirling thoughts. To my surprise, this physical assertion shifted the energy inside me. Confidence stirred gently, as if I was reclaiming a territory I hadn't realized I'd abandoned. My voice found clarity and strength. I contributed ideas instead of shrinking back. For the first time, I sensed that the terrain of my internal state could be mapped not only by thought but by deliberate body presence, a terrain I had underestimated until then. Later that week, I encountered a young man at the gym, a stranger whose raw enthusiasm reminded me of early days on my own path. His energy was infectious. He carried himself without concern for competition, focused instead on personal progress. Watching him, I felt a pang that soon shifted into insight. Where I had often collided with comparison's harsh edge, he seemed untouched, as though his body understood a different rhythm. It struck me that sometimes, the greatest resistance lies not in external pressures but in the stories our bodies have been trained to tell, stories that can be rewritten if we engage with them attentively. Meeting him ignited a resolve within me to redefine how my physical self and mindset danced together. One evening, while sitting alone during a rain-drizzled walk, I traced patterns in the wet pavement, reflecting on these discoveries. The rhythmic tapping of droplets became a kind of meditation, each sound a reminder that small, consistent adjustments could ripple into profound changes. I recalled those moments when comparison's shadow had compressed my chest and dimmed my gaze, contrasting sharply with brief episodes where I chose spaciousness in my breath and openness in my stance. It felt as though I was learning to unlock a secret language between body and mind, a dialogue that could alter the tides of my internal weather. I realized that this dialogue demanded trust and patience, for it challenged deep-seated automatic responses etched by years of conditioning. Not long after, a friend shared a story about an ancient warrior tradition that emphasized the alignment of breath, posture, and focus as a means to cultivate inner strength amid chaos. Curious, I tried simple breathing exercises combined with mindful adjustments to how I occupied space. Sitting quietly, inhaling slowly while rolling my shoulders back, I noticed subtle shifts. Tension that had felt immovable softened, mental clutter calmed, and an unexpected steadiness settled over my thoughts. This practice didn't erase moments of doubt but introduced a new way of meeting them, less as obstacles and more as signals guiding me toward balance. The paradox was clear. By embracing vulnerability through physical awareness, I accessed a reservoir of courage that comparison's grip had long obscured. Facing a challenging conversation at work soon after, I used this newfound approach. As nerves flickered beneath my skin, I set my feet firmly, opened my chest, and breathed with intention. Instead of succumbing to old patterns of withdrawal, I met the exchange with composed openness. The results surprised me. Not only did I hold my ground, but a subtle sense of ease infused the interaction. People responded not only to my words but to the steady energy I conveyed. That experience underscored a profound truth. When I shift my embodied presence, I rewrite the narrative that comparison attempts to script inside me. Physical alignment becomes a form of spoken language, one that others sense deeply. Now, consider the moments you feel the tug of silent comparison pressing on you. Whether at work, among friends, or facing your own reflection late at night. Imagine the possibility of interrupting that tug with something simple yet powerful, a conscious repositioning of your body that anchors you in your own reality rather than someone else's. Picture how a steady breath could create a pause, a widening within where insecurity once crowded out your potential. This practice isn't about denial or forced positivity. It's about listening beyond thought, hearing the body's signals and responding with intentional presence. It's an invitation to reclaim agency not just over your mind but over how your whole self engages with the world. Building on these insights, I've begun to watch carefully for what my body reveals in the smallest interactions. A tightened jaw, a quickened pulse, a collapsing posture. taking these as starting points for recentering rather than indicators of failure. This shift demands mercy toward myself and a commitment to lean into the discomfort that arises when old patterns are challenged. Yet, with each moment of conscious physical realignment, I step further from comparison's shadow and closer to an authentic inner authority. The path is ongoing, but with each breath, each realigned moment, I forge new possibilities, a testament to the profound power residing within the dynamic between body and mind. A few weeks ago, I found myself in a situation that caught me off guard. One of those spontaneous confrontations with my own expectations. I was sitting at a cafe, sharing a table with a group of men whose conversations sparked lively debates about accomplishments and future goals. As their voices intertwined, I noticed an unexpected sensation coursing through my body, a tightening not from hostility or judgment, but from an internal hesitation to claim my space. My hands subconsciously gripped the coffee cup, knuckles pale, as if bracing against a falling tide. I realized then that my body was quietly signaling a withdrawal, a shrinking away from presence despite my mind's insistence to stay engaged. It was a vivid lesson on how certain environments can trigger these internal responses without uttering a word. During the pause between stories, I marked how my chest felt constricted, and I searched inside for the source of this closing sensation. The answer wasn't woven into the conversation directly. Instead, it hid in the unsaid architecture of assumptions and assessments I had carried unknowingly. I recognized a pattern where, beneath social interactions, my body interpreted shifts in importance or influence, and rather than settle into its natural rhythm, it responded by pulling inward, anticipating an unspoken challenge. That moment made me aware of an undercurrent I'd overlooked. My physical reaction was less a reflection of reality and more a conditioned adaptation to perceived fluctuations in social gravity. On the sidewalk afterward, I processed this quietly as I walked. The city buzzed around me, each step resonating with the echo of that earlier encounter. It struck me how often daily life delivers these microdoses of subtle recalibration. A glance exchanged, a tone of voice altered ever so slightly, a shift in eye contact. All cues my body scans relentlessly. Often, I felt like a ship steering through fog without a compass, swaying in currents of comparison on waters I hadn't charted for myself. The exhaustion wasn't from external pressure as much as from surviving the internal turbulence caused by those subtle signals. Acting on a sudden impulse, I decided to refuse the habitual response on my next encounter with this sensation. I recalled a memory from a martial arts class years ago when my instructor said, "Your stance is your signal to the world." I remembered how straightening my back, grounding my feet, and opening my chest could shift not only balance but confidence. So, in a crowded meeting room a few days later, when I caught that familiar chill of invisibility creeping up, I planted my feet firmly, lifted my gaze, and breathed with intentionality. The effect was immediate. The muscles that had instinctively tensed in retreat released, replaced by an unexpected quiet power. Others noticed the change, too. Eyes met mine more readily, voices invited my input. The difference was more than posture. It was an unspoken assertion of belonging. Later that month, I summoned the courage to share this experience during a men's group gathering. As I spoke, I admired how the room softened in response, as if these confessions had opened a door to honest vulnerability. One man approached afterwards and confessed he'd wrestled with similar shutdown moments, describing his body as a guarded fortress, reacting to perceived judgments. Even in quiet spaces, our exchange reinforced a vital truth. Many of us carry these unspoken battles beneath the surface, alone in a crowded room. Realizing this transformed my understanding from isolation to a shared human condition, a collective choreography of invisible struggles and silent resilience. One afternoon, I experimented further, combining breathwork with small intentional movements. Sitting at my desk, I placed one hand flat on my chest, the other on my lower back, feeling the pulse beneath my palms. I focused on creating space, imagining my breath as expanding energy filling every corner of my torso. Gradually, I rolled my shoulders back and allowed a slow smile to soften my expression. The physicality of this simple ritual diffused the lingering knot of fatigue and quieted the restless mind. That action became a secret source of reset amid demanding days. A momentary reclaiming of agency when habitual responses threatened to steal my equilibrium. I'm drawn to the story of an old fisherman I once met during a trip, a man whose life intertwined with the ocean's unpredictable rhythms. He told me how, when faced with storms, he would anchor himself with a steady stance, feeling the boat beneath him like an extension of his own body. The sea will crash, the wind will roar, he said. But if you root yourself well, you weather the worst without losing your center. His metaphor now lives within me. It emphasizes an essential practice, cultivating inner grounding that isn't vulnerable to every external surge. I understand more clearly that fostering this rooted presence interrupts cycles that otherwise drain us, inviting a response built on steadfastness, not reflexive retreat. Now, consider moments when you experience that subtle shift, when a fleeting glance or whispered remark stirs a familiar contraction inside your body. What if, instead of succumbing to that collapse, you planted your own anchor deep? Imagine your breath as a calm harbor, your posture as an unmoving mast standing tall against fleeting storms. By meeting these sensations head-on, not as weaknesses but as signals calling you to center, you can transform your embodied experience. Your body doesn't have to be a battleground. It can become a sanctuary where your true strength rises, unshaken by passing currents. This subtle art of presence demands vigilance and patience, but it offers rich rewards, a growing capacity to hold steady amid unpredictable tides. As I test these waters more often, I discover that what my body once used as a shield to shrink becomes a bridge to connection, resilience, and authentic power. The process is ongoing, a dance between awareness and action that deepens with every step. It invites me, and invites you, to refuse the quiet sinking and instead rise, firmly anchored in the undeniable reality of our own worth. I remember sitting quietly, eyes closed, the faint hum of everyday life folding around me like a distant tide. In that stillness, a cascade of subtle sensations rose, not loud or forceful, but persistent enough to pull at my awareness. I felt a delicate shift in my breathing, a nuanced contraction beneath my ribs, and an old resonance inside that often whispered stories I hadn't learned to question before. It was as if countless invisible threads were tugging gently yet insistently at my core, threading through moments lived and feelings barely named. These threads, thin and almost imperceptible, wove a tapestry, not of confinement, but of intricate design, where assumptions met biology, and quiet narratives shaped unseen contours of my presence. This woven fabric seemed endlessly complex, like a river carving its path quietly beneath rugged terrain. There's a power in currents unseen, in waters beneath waiting patiently before they surge with undeniable force, reshaping shores before anyone realizes what moved them. I sensed that something similar was unfolding deep within, a disregarded flow shaping how I stood, breathed, and reached toward my own potential. These undercurrents had long been in motion, their energy neither cruel nor kind, only responsive. Somehow, they both reflected and influenced the unspoken dialogue between my inner landscape and the outer world's subtle demands. One evening, as twilight settled, I spoke with a friend whose laughter held an uncommon ease. He shared tales of battles fought not against rivals, but shadows cast within. His voice was steady, earnest, not seeking pity, but understanding. "It's an invisible dance," he said. "One we enter before we even know the music plays." His words settled beside me like a flame in night's chill. Together, we traced those delicate movements, how each step, often unnoticed, shifted weight and intention. His perspective opened a door for me, not toward weakness, but toward a kind of vigilance that honors these silent exchanges inside. I began to recognize them less as enemies and more as complex signals calling me toward awareness. Walking later through dim-lit streets, I watched how others moved. Heads held high or bowed low, steps quick or hesitant, each carrying stories as palpable as my own. The city breathed rhythmically, alive with nuances no words could fully capture. I realized that what I sensed inside was not alone but mirrored collectively. a shared pulse beneath facades of strength or ease. This collective pulse felt less like a competition and more like a network of interwoven journeys, each man wrestling privately with tides that sought to pull him off course or, if met with care, lead him back to center. It was humbling and strangely freeing to know this shared gravity existed, unseen but felt deeply. In the quiet moments that followed, I noticed an invitation unfolding, a subtle ask to re-engage with my body and mind in new ways, not as adversaries forced into battle, but as allies exploring terrain together. I recalled a metaphor of a tree weathering storms, its roots deepening with each passing gust, bending before winds but never breaking, finding resilience in flexibility. This image felt close to what I was beginning to understand, that strength may not emerge simply from standing firm against pressure, but from the capacity to adapt without losing form or self. That dance between surrender and assertion seemed to hold a vital key. Conversations I once avoided started to feel possible. I sensed the possibility of sitting with vulnerability without allowing it to dictate my boundaries or diminish my voice. This shift was neither sudden nor grandiose but subtle, a quiet turning of attention from the hollow echoes of external validation toward the rich textures of self-possession. It felt like stepping out of a shadowed corridor into a space where light didn't blind but instead revealed pathways previously hidden from vision but always beneath my feet. The journey inward, I realized, held a rhythm that demanded patience, presence, and trust. Reflecting on this journey so far, I grasp how intricately threaded the relationship between body, mind, and unspoken story can be. What seemed like small, almost unnoticed moments are in fact profound currents shaping how we engage with ourselves and the world around us. The sensation of constriction, the urge to withdraw, these are not signs of failure but evidence of a nervous system adapting to cues it interprets as danger or loss. Yet within these responses lies a tremendous opportunity to consciously steer them toward renewal, to rewrite the commands whispered by ancient survival instincts. This awareness doesn't just offer reprieve from exhaustion. It opens a gateway to reclaim presence, vitality, and an anchored confidence grounded in something deeper than fleeting status. As I watch how the evening sky deepens into night, a quiet certainty takes root within me. Something has shifted, not in dramatic leaps, but in the gentle reaffirmation that transformation flows from understanding the subtle signals beneath surface appearances. It invites me to stand taller in spaces where before I might have hesitated, to breathe fuller when corners of doubt arise, and to recognize that my worth isn't calibrated by external measures but by a rootedness cultivated from within. This horizon, waiting just ahead, promises not finality but a new beginning, a place where presence and power dance in harmony, and where our steps fall true on paths we shape with intention and grace. There was a moment recently when I stood quietly after a long day, feeling the steady pulse of exhaustion settle into my bones. It wasn't a weariness born of physical strain alone, but one rooted deep within an unseen struggle, the silent weighing of myself against invisible benchmarks that never truly reflected my journey. As night cloaked the sky, I noticed how easily my body curled inward, like a bird seeking shelter after a storm. Yet, beneath that instinct lay a flicker of something unexpectedly fierce, a desire to rise, to unfold into more than the shadows whispered I could be. It surprised me how often I had allowed invisible forces to dictate my posture, my breath, the very space I dared to occupy. Years of unnoticed contests had sculpted a version of myself that instinctively retreated when subtle cues hinted at shifts in social currents. And yet, through moments like these, the quiet unveiling begins, the realization that the adjustments made beneath awareness are not fixed chains but malleable strands, responsive to gentle rewiring. I saw clearly how my biology wasn't a prisoner to these stories. It held a remarkable capacity for transformation, an openness to recalibrate identity from the inside out. The truth settled in that evening like a soft ember. Reclaiming presence involves more than courage. It calls for profound intimacy with one's own rhythms, a listening that moves beyond expectations or measurements imposed from outside. The tug of shifting energies within is less an adversary than a signal, a map drawn in sensations that guide us toward authenticity when we take the time to follow. This kind of awareness couldn't be rushed or forced. It demanded patience, humility, and an unwavering commitment to stand gently firm amid all impulses to shrink. I remembered an old friend's voice, steady and low, who once explained, "Power isn't about outshining a crowd. It's the quiet clarity of knowing your ground even when it trembles." That phrase swelled in my chest, carrying a weight and a promise. What if true strength is born not in contest or comparison but in cultivating a sanctuary within? A place where presence is anchored not by external markers, but by an enduring sense of belonging to ourselves. The realization shifted the atmosphere around me, as if the room itself softened, inviting a steadiness that radiated without demand or pretense. In the days that followed, I began practicing small revolutions. A mindful inhale to blanket racing thoughts, a deliberate straightening that told my muscles to stand tall, an unguarded moment where I permitted vulnerability without hesitation. These acts carried a quiet beauty, weaving into my being a tapestry richer than any accolade or validation. Power and humility intertwined, forging a balance where softness did not equate weakness, and strength blossomed from acceptance. I'm learning that these internal shifts ripple outward, softening interactions, deepening connections, opening unforeseen pathways not because I've conquered someone else's measure, but because I've embraced my own unfolding story. And while temptation remains to measure worth by fleeting reflections in eyes not always kind, I am reminded now that such scales are illusions. The real measure is found in the rhythms of breath and the posture of heart, in the spaces we carve out to honor our true selves. If I could offer one quiet invitation to you, it would be this: pause in your moments of tension and listen attentively, not to the cacophony of external narratives, but to what subtle whispers your body carries. There lies a language ancient and profound, waiting patiently to guide you back into alignment with your own force. Trust that within you dwells a wellspring of steady power, one that does not need anything outside itself to bloom. So, as I navigate the days ahead, I carry this newfound awareness, ready to meet challenges not as battles but as opportunities to practice presence, to hold space for discomfort as a teacher, to stand unshaken by shifting tides. This journey isn't about becoming invincible, but about becoming whole, fiercely alive, and ever more deeply aware that the geography of true strength begins within. And here, in this gentle revolution of body and mind, I find a home.